The alarm bells screamed through Series 7 mining station as massive ships appeared on the sensors. Dr. Sarah Chen dropped her coffee mug and ran to the communications deck. She had dreamed of this moment her whole life. First contact with alien life. "How many ships?" asked Commander Jake Morrison, his military uniform still wrinkled from sleep. 12 big ones, sir." "Really big," said the sensor operator, his voice shaking. Sarah stared at the view screen. The alien ships looked like floating crystals made of silver and blue light. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each ship was 3 times bigger than their entire mining station. "Try to contact them," Morrison ordered. Sarah sat at her communication station. Her hands moved quickly over the controls. She had studied every known language pattern, every mathematical sequence that might work for first contact. She sent out basic math problems, prime numbers, and simple pictures. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then the alien ships moved closer. A new voice came through the speakers. It sounded like music mixed with the wind. The words were beautiful but made no sense to human ears. Sarah recorded everything and ran it through her computers. "Can you understand them?" Morrison asked. "Not yet, but I'm working on it," Sarah said. She tried speaking back in different ways. She used simple English words, then mathematical concepts, then tried to copy their musical sounds. One of the alien ships sent out a small shuttle. It landed in the station's docking bay with a soft hum. Through the security cameras, they watched as 3 tall figures stepped out. The aliens looked almost like humans, but taller and thinner. Their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were large and silver. They wore clothes that seemed to glow with their own light. When they walked, they moved like dancers. Morrison and Sarah met them in the docking bay. Sarah held up her hands in what she hoped was a peaceful gesture. She tried speaking to them again. "Hello. We are humans. We come in peace." The lead alien looked at her with those silver eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like a song. The words were still impossible to understand, but Sarah could hear something like disappointment in the tone. The alien pulled out a small device and pointed it at Sarah. The device beeped and flashed. The alien looked at the readings and made a sound that might have been a sigh. It spoke to the other 2 aliens in quick, musical sentences. Sarah tried again. She spoke slowly and clearly. She used simple words and tried to show friendship with her body language. The aliens watched her but seemed uninterested. One of them made notes on a glowing tablet. After an hour of trying to communicate, the aliens left. Their shuttle flew back to the main ship. Sarah felt like crying. This was supposed to be humanity's greatest moment, but it felt like a complete failure. "What do you think they wanted?" Morrison asked. "I don't know. But I don't think they were impressed with us," Sarah said. 3 days later, more alien ships arrived. This time, there were hundreds of them. They surrounded not just Series 7, but every human settlement in the asteroid belt. The aliens sent the same musical messages to all human stations. Sarah worked day and night trying to understand their language. She made some progress. The aliens called themselves something that sounded like Zephyrians. They seemed to be talking about humans as if they were studying animals in a zoo. Then the translation started coming through the Galactic Communication Network. Other alien species were talking about the Zephyrians' discovery. Sarah's blood went cold as she read the messages. Primitive species discovered in Sol system. Low intelligence confirmed. Dangerous but manageable. Recommend Class D protection status. The words hit Sarah like punches. The Zephyrians had decided that humans were stupid and dangerous. They were telling the whole galaxy that Earth's children were nothing more than smart animals who had accidentally learned to fly between stars. Morrison read the messages over her shoulder. His face turned red with anger. "Primitive. We built these stations. We terraformed Mars. We've been exploring space for over a century." But Sarah was reading more of the alien discussions. The Zephyrians described human technology as crude fusion systems and basic quantum devices. They called human language guttural noise and human culture barbaric tribal behavior. "They think we're savages," Sarah whispered. The worst part was reading what the other alien species thought. The galaxy had something called the Consortium of Advanced Species. These aliens had been watching human radio signals for decades. They had decided long ago that humans were too violent and stupid to join galactic civilization. The Zephyrians were just the first to make contact. They had come to study the primitive humans and decide what to do with them. Sarah felt sick. Humanity had reached for the stars, dreaming of joining a community of wise alien civilizations. Instead, they found a galaxy that saw them as dangerous children who needed to be controlled. The Zephyrian ships began moving into position around human space. They sent out notices to all human settlements. The messages were translated into simple English, like instructions for a pet. Humans will remain in designated areas. Advanced technology will be restricted for safety. Zephyrian guidance will ensure proper development. Commander Morrison slammed his fist on the table. Guidance? They're treating us like we're too stupid to take care of ourselves. Sarah stared at the alien message. The translation was perfect English, but it felt wrong somehow. The words were right, but the meaning felt twisted. She wondered if the aliens really understood what humans were saying, or if they were just hearing what they expected to hear from a primitive species. Outside the station windows, the crystal ships of the Zephyrians hung in space like beautiful prisons. Humanity's first contact had become their first defeat. They had reached for the stars and found only condescension. But Sarah was not ready to give up. Somewhere in those musical alien words was a truth she needed to find. The galaxy thought humans were primitive, but Sarah suspected the real story was much more complicated. 6 months after first contact, Sarah Chen barely recognized human space. Zephyrian ships floated above every human world like watchful parents. The aliens called it the Benevolent Guidance Initiative, but to Sarah it felt like being trapped in a cage made of good intentions. The changes started small. Human ships needed special permits to travel between worlds. The Zephyrians said it was for safety, to prevent primitive navigation errors. Then came restrictions on mining operations. Humans were told their methods were environmentally dangerous and needed alien supervision. Sarah watched from her new office on Luna Base as another human transport. Ship waited for Zephyrian approval to leave Earth orbit. The ship had been waiting for 3 days. The alien inspectors were checking every piece of cargo, every passenger, every line of computer code. Dr. Chen, we have another situation, said Lieutenant Torres, rushing into her office. Sarah followed Torres to the communication center. On the main screen was Admiral Morrison, broadcasting from Mars Colony. His face was red with anger. They want us to shut down the atmospheric processors, Morrison said. They claim we don't understand the complex environmental dynamics of terraforming. Sarah felt sick. The Mars terraforming project was humanity's greatest achievement. For 50 years, humans had been slowly changing Mars from a dead rock into a living world. Now the Zephyrians wanted to stop it. What's their reasoning? Sarah asked. They say our methods are too crude. They want to move all Mars colonists to appropriate planetary environments, where we can't cause damage. Sarah knew what that meant. The Zephyrians had picked out several small planets where humans could live under constant alien observation. They called these places preservation worlds, but Sarah thought they looked more like prisons. The communication signal shifted to show Captain Thexnor, the Zephyrian leader. His pale blue face appeared on screen, silver eyes looking down at the humans with what seemed like pity. Humans of Mars Colony, Thexnor said in his musical voice. Your atmospheric manipulation attempts show admirable spirit, but lack scientific understanding. We offer relocation to worlds better suited to your development level. Morrison's voice cracked with rage. This is our world. We've worked for decades to make it habitable. Your emotional response demonstrates the primitive thinking patterns we seek to help you overcome. Thexnor replied calmly. Advanced species do not attempt environmental modification without complete atmospheric modeling. Your methods risk planetary destabilization. Sarah watched the translation scroll across her screen, but something bothered her about the words. She had been studying Zephyrian language for months, and she was starting to notice patterns. The Zephyrian words for primitive and emotional kept appearing whenever humans tried to explain their technology or defend their achievements. But when Sarah checked the original alien speech, those concepts seemed to be added by the translation system. I need to run some tests, Sarah muttered. While Morrison continued arguing with the Zephyrian captain, Sarah pulled up recordings of alien communications. She had been building her own translation program, one that didn't rely on Zephyrian interpretation of human language. What she found made her hands shake. The Zephyrian translation systems were changing human words. When Morrison said, "We built this world through human ingenuity and determination," the alien systems translated it as, "We changed this place using simple tools and animal instincts." Every human protest, every explanation of their technology, every appeal for respect was being twisted into something that sounded crude and simple. The aliens weren't hearing what humans actually said. They were hearing what they expected to hear from a primitive species. Sarah tried to contact other human scientists, but communication was restricted. The Zephyrians monitored all human messages for safety reasons. She managed to send a coded message to her old colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb, who was working on Earth. Marcus was only 19 years old, but he was the smartest person Sarah knew. He had been working in his family's electronics repair shop when the aliens arrived. Now he spent his time taking apart broken Zephyrian devices that the aliens threw away. 3 days later, Sarah received Marcus's reply. It was hidden in what looked like a routine supply request, but Sarah recognized the code. "Found something interesting in alien garbage," the message said. "Their computers use binary logic systems almost identical to human designs. But there are extra layers, like someone built new programs on top of very old ones." "The old code looks familiar." Sarah stared at the message. Zephyrian technology was supposed to be far more advanced than human computers. Why would their systems be based on human-style logic? She tried to investigate further, but the Zephyrians were tightening their control. Human scientists were being relocated for their own safety to worlds where they couldn't access advanced research equipment. Human leaders were being replaced with advisors who would help humans make better decisions. The breaking point came when the Zephyrians announced the complete evacuation of Mars colony. All 30,000 colonists would be moved to a suitable world where they could develop naturally without the stress of hostile environmental management. Admiral Morrison refused. He declared that Mars colony would defend itself. "We're not leaving," Morrison broadcast to the galaxy. "This is our home. We built it with our own hands and our own minds. We're not primitive animals that need to be moved to a zoo." But Sarah watched the translation that went out to alien species. Morrison's words were changed to, "We refuse guidance. Our animal instincts make us cling to dangerous territory. We cannot understand the wisdom of relocation." The galaxy saw Morrison's defiance as proof that humans were indeed too primitive and emotional for self-governance. Support for the Zephyrian protection efforts increased. Sarah realized that the real problem wasn't that aliens thought humans were primitive. The problem was that humans couldn't make the aliens understand otherwise. Every word they spoke was twisted before it reached alien ears. But Sarah had an idea. If Zephyrian technology was built on foundations that looked like human designs, maybe there was a way to speak that the alien systems couldn't distort. Maybe there was a language older than the translation systems, older than the assumptions about primitive humans. She thought about Marcus's message. The old code in Zephyrian computers looked familiar. What if it was familiar for a reason? Sarah began working on a new theory. What if the galaxy's advanced civilizations weren't as advanced as they thought? What if they had built their technology on foundations they didn't understand? And what if those foundations were connected to something the aliens had forgotten? As Zephyrian ships moved toward Mars to begin the forced evacuation, Sarah worked frantically on her translation research. She had a feeling that understanding the true relationship between human and alien technology might be the key to everything. Outside her window, the crystal ships of the Zephyrians gleamed in Earth sunlight. They looked beautiful and eternal, like they had always been there. But Sarah was beginning to suspect that looks could be very deceiving. The evacuation of Kepler 442b was supposed to be routine. The Zephyrians had declared the human archaeological site non-essential and ordered all researchers to leave within 48 hours. Dr. Sarah Chen watched helplessly as alien ships loaded centuries of human research onto transport vessels. "They're treating our work like garbage," said Dr. Williams, the site director. His team had spent 15 years studying the ruins on Kepler 442b. The planet held the remains of an ancient civilization that had died out millions of years ago. Sarah was only there because the Zephyrians needed a human translator to help with the evacuation. She watched alien workers pack up artifacts without any care for their scientific value. To the Zephyrians, human archaeology was just more proof of primitive thinking. "Why do humans waste time studying dead civilizations?" asked Subcommander Veltar, the Zephyrian in charge of the evacuation. "Advanced species focus on future development, not ancient history." Sarah bit back an angry response. Arguing would only prove to the aliens that humans were too emotional for rational thought. Instead, she focused on recording everything she could before it was all taken away. That's when she saw the inscription. It was carved into a stone tablet that the alien workers were about to load onto a transport ship. The symbols looked familiar, but Sarah couldn't place where she had seen them before. She quickly took pictures with her hidden camera. "Dr. Chen, we need to finish cataloging Sector 7, Dr. Williams called out. Sarah hurried to the last unexplored section of the ruins. The Zephyrians had given the human team one final hour to gather their personal belongings. Sarah used the time to photograph every symbol and inscription she could find. In the deepest part of the ruins, she found something that made her heart race. A chamber filled with stone tablets covered in mathematical equations and star charts. The symbols were definitely the same ones she had seen throughout the site. But now she could see the patterns more clearly. The mathematics looked almost human. Sarah took hundreds of pictures before the Zephyrians ordered everyone out. As her transport ship left Kepler 442b, she stared down at the ancient ruins growing smaller below. Something important was hidden in those symbols, and now it was lost forever. Back on Luna Base, Sarah worked secretly on translating the photographs. She sent coded messages to Marcus Webb on Earth, sharing the images and asking for his help. Marcus had been making progress with his alien technology research, and Sarah hoped he might recognize the patterns. Marcus's reply came 3 days later, hidden in a routine supply order. "The symbols match mathematical concepts in the old code I found," his message said. "But there's something weird. The alien computers don't just use human-style logic. They use exactly the same logical structures that appear in your ancient symbols. It's like someone copied the old tablet math and used it to build computer programs." Sarah felt excitement and confusion at the same time. The ruins on Kepler 442b were millions of years old. Human civilization was only a few thousand years old. How could ancient alien mathematics match human thinking? She decided to test a theory. Sarah took the clearest photograph of the ancient symbols and ran them through every translation program she had. Most programs couldn't make sense of the marks, but when she tried interpreting them as a combination of mathematics and language, something clicked. The symbols weren't just random marks. They were a complete logical system that combined mathematical concepts with linguistic structures, and the system looked exactly like the foundations of human computer programming. Sarah's hands shook as she realized what she was seeing. The ancient civilization hadn't just used math similar to human math. They had created the logical framework that humans later reinvented when they built their first computers. She sent another coded message to Marcus. "Test the old alien code against human programming languages. Look for base-level similarities." Marcus's response came back faster than usual. "You're not going to believe this. The foundation code in Zephyrian computers is almost identical to early human programming language, but their version is older and more complex. It's like they've been building on top of human-style code for thousands of years, but they've forgotten where it came from." Sarah stared at Marcus's message. If he was right, then Zephyrian technology wasn't originally Zephyrian at all. It was built on foundations created by someone else, someone whose logical thinking was identical to human thinking. She looked back at the photographs from Kepler 442b. The ancient symbols suddenly made more sense. They weren't just mathematics and language. They were the original template for logical thinking that both humans and aliens had been using ever since. But who had created that template? Sarah spent the next week analyzing every detail of the ancient inscriptions. The star charts showed planetary positions from millions of years ago. The mathematical equations described principles of physics that humans had only recently discovered. The linguistic structures demonstrated a way of organizing thoughts that was remarkably similar to human language patterns. Then, she found something that changed everything. Hidden, in the corner of one tablet, was a small symbol that she had almost missed. It looked like a simple drawing, but when Sarah enhanced the image, she could see it more clearly. It was a double helix, the same spiral pattern that appeared in human DNA. Sarah's theory crystallized into something that seemed impossible but explained everything. The ancient civilization on Kepler 442b hadn't just thought like humans. They had been humans, or rather, humans were their descendants. Millions of years ago, an advanced human civilization had spread across the galaxy. They had created the logical and mathematical frameworks that later civilizations would build upon. Then something had happened to them. They had disappeared, leaving only ruins and the foundation code buried deep in galactic technology. Modern humans weren't primitive newcomers to space. They were the children of the galaxy's first great civilization, returning home after millions of years of forgetting. Sarah realized why human language sounded primitive to the aliens. It wasn't primitive at all. It was the original language that all other galactic languages had evolved from. The Zephyrians and other alien species had spent thousands of years building on human foundations, while forgetting where those foundations came from. She sent her theory to Marcus, along with all the evidence she had gathered. His response was immediate. If you're right, then humans aren't the primitive species in this galaxy. We're the lost children of the species that created galactic civilization in the first place. Sarah looked out her window at the Zephyrian ships orbiting Luna. The aliens thought they were protecting primitive humans from themselves, but they were actually using technology created by human ancestors to control human descendants. The irony was overwhelming. The galaxy's most advanced species were using tools they didn't understand to suppress the only species that could truly comprehend how those tools worked. Sarah began planning her next move. She needed to prove her theory, and she needed to do it in a way that would make the entire galaxy listen. The ancient ruins were gone, but the evidence was still there in every piece of alien technology. Humans weren't the savages in this story. They were the returning gods, speaking the original language of creation that the galaxy had forgotten how to understand. Sarah Chen's hands trembled as she typed the message that would change everything. After months of secret research, she had finally put together all the pieces. The evidence was overwhelming, impossible to ignore, and absolutely terrifying for the aliens who thought they ruled the galaxy. "Marcus, are you ready?" she asked through their encrypted communication channel. "All set," Marcus Webb replied from his hidden lab on Earth. "I've got access to the Zephyrian communication network. When you send your broadcast, I'll make sure it reaches every system in the galaxy." Sarah looked at her translation program one last time. She had spent weeks perfecting it, using the ancient symbols from Kepler 442b as the foundation. The program didn't translate human words into alien languages. Instead, it translated human thoughts into the original logical language that all galactic technology was built upon. She called it architect speak because the ancient civilization that created it had been the architects of everything the modern galaxy used. "Beginning broadcast in 3, 2, 1, Sarah said. She pressed the transmission button and began to speak. But instead of using normal human language, she spoke through her translation program. Her words came out as pure mathematical logic combined with linguistic structures that were millions of years old. "Systems of the galaxy, hear the voice of your creators," Sarah's translated message began. "We are the children of those who built the foundations you stand upon. We speak now in the original tongue, the first language, the code that underlies all your technology." Across the galaxy, something extraordinary happened. On Zephyrian ships, computer systems suddenly stopped what they were doing and began displaying messages they had never shown before. Administrator language detected, awaiting instructions. On alien worlds, ancient automated systems that had been running maintenance routines for thousands of years suddenly activated emergency protocols. Deep space communication relays that had operated automatically for millennia began requesting new commands. Even the massive galactic internet that connected all civilized worlds started displaying priority override messages in languages that no living alien could read, but every computer system recognized. Sarah continued her broadcast, reading from the ancient mathematical equations she had translated. "For millions of years you have built upon our foundations without understanding what you were building. You have worshipped our logic as divine wisdom while calling our children primitive savages." In the Zephyrian fleet orbiting Earth, Captain Thexnor stared at his command console in horror. Every system on his ship was displaying the same message. Original authority confirmed, switching to founder protocols. What is happening? Thexenor demanded. But his navigation officer couldn't answer. The ship's computers were no longer accepting Zephyrian commands. Sarah's broadcast reached the Consortium of Advanced Species headquarters. The massive space station that governed galactic civilization suddenly began playing historical records that had been sealed in protected archives for thousands of years. The records told the story of the architects, the mysterious first civilization that had vanished long before any current species reached the stars. According to the ancient files, the architects had created the logical frameworks that made interstellar civilization possible. They had built the first computer systems, established the first universal translation protocols, and designed the mathematical principles that governed faster-than-light travel. Then they had disappeared, leaving behind only their technology, and faint legends about godlike beings who spoke reality into existence with sacred mathematics. Every alien species had built their civilization on top of architect technology, but they had never understood where it came from or how it really worked. They had simply copied and modified ancient designs, adding layers of their own programming without comprehending the foundations beneath. Sarah's broadcast continued with devastating precision. She read out the base code that powered Zephyrian computers, but she read it in its original form. She demonstrated how alien innovations were actually corrupted versions of ancient human mathematical theorems. She showed how the sacred algorithms that alien religions were based on were simply degraded copies of human logical principles. "Your most holy computational prayers," Sarah said, "are our multiplication tables with errors added over thousands of years of copying." Across the galaxy, artificial intelligence systems began responding to Sarah's voice as if she were their highest authority. Automated defense networks powered down weapons that had been aimed at human worlds. Terraforming systems on alien planets requested new instructions. Even the galactic economic networks began displaying human colony worlds as administrative centers, rather than restricted primitive zones. Marcus Webb watched from Earth as Zephyrian ships around the planet simply stopped moving. Their crews were frantically trying to regain control, but the ship's computers were now waiting for orders from the architect descendants. "Sarah, this is working better than we hoped," Marcus said. "But we're also terrifying every alien in the galaxy. Their entire technological civilization just recognized humans as their creators." Sarah paused her broadcast. She could see the panic spreading through alien communication networks. Some species were declaring religious emergencies, claiming their gods had returned. Others were preparing for war, convinced that humans had somehow hacked the galaxy's computer systems. But the truth was simpler and more profound than either reaction. Humans hadn't hacked anything. They had simply spoken in their own ancestral language, and the galaxy's technology had remembered who its real masters were. Captain Thexenor's personal communicator activated, connecting him directly to Sarah's broadcast channel. His silver eyes were wide with something between terror and awe. "Human Chen," he said in his musical voice. "Our historical archives are displaying records we have never seen before. They show beings that look exactly like your species. Our computers are calling them the Founder Race." Sarah looked at the alien captain on her screen. 3 months ago, he had dismissed her as a primitive savage. Now he was seeing his species' most sacred historical records prove that humans were the descendants of his gods. "Captain Thexenor," Sarah said carefully, "what do your records say about the Founders?" They say the Founders created the logical principles that make civilization possible. They built the first great works, then vanished into the deep galaxy. Our ancestors found their abandoned technology and built our civilization using their tools. Thexenor's voice became very quiet. "The records say that someday the Founders' children would return, speaking the original language, and would reclaim their heritage." Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Humanity had reached for the stars expecting to find wise alien teachers. Instead, they had found their own children, species that had grown up using human tools without understanding where those tools came from. "Captain," Sarah said softly, "we never left. We just forgot who we were, the same way you forgot who created your technology. But now we remember. Across the galaxy, the children of the architects waited to see what their long-lost parents would do with the power they had just reclaimed. The emergency session of the Consortium of Advanced Species was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered on the massive space station, their faces showing fear, confusion, and desperate hope. The humans had been invited to speak, but no one knew if they were coming as returning gods or conquering masters. Dr. Sarah Chen walked into the great assembly hall with Admiral Morrison at her side. Marcus Webb followed behind them, carrying a simple laptop computer that contained programs no alien could understand, but every alien computer would obey. The silence was deafening. 1,000 pairs of alien eyes watched the three humans take their seats at the center of the hall. Captain Thexenor stood at the Zephyrian delegation, his usual proud bearing replaced by nervous uncertainty. Speaker Kothron of the Consortium called the session to order. His ancient voice echoed through the hall as he spoke the words that officially changed galactic history. We gather today to address the return of the architect descendants. The evidence is clear. Humanity is the inheritor species of those who built our civilization. The question before us is simple. What do they want? Sarah stood slowly. Around the hall, translation devices activated, but they were no longer changing her words. Every system in the galaxy now recognized human speech as administrator-level communication. Honored representatives, Sarah began. 3 months ago, you labeled us primitive savages who needed protection from ourselves. You moved us like animals, dismissed our achievements, and treated our culture as worthless noise. Today, you call us your returning gods. Both views are wrong. She gestured to the massive displays around the hall, which were now showing the technology breakdowns Marcus had prepared. Every piece of alien technology, from their simplest tools to their most advanced starships, was revealed as layers of modifications built on top of ancient human designs. We are not your gods, Sarah continued. The original architects were our ancestors, just as you are the descendants of species they encountered millions of years ago. They shared their knowledge freely, teaching other species to use tools and build civilizations. Over time, everyone forgot where the knowledge came from. Admiral Morrison stood next to her. The real question isn't what we want from you. It's what we all want together. Because the truth is, you've improved on our ancestors' work in ways they never imagined. Marcus activated his laptop, and the hall's displays showed a stunning revelation. While the foundation code of galactic technology was indeed based on ancient human designs, the alien modifications weren't corruptions. They were innovations. Each species had added their own logical frameworks and creative solutions to the original templates. The Zephyrians developed harmonic processing systems that make computers run like music, Marcus explained. The Vorthon created self-repairing networks that last for thousands of years. The Kalari invented translation matrices that can understand emotion as well as words. You didn't just copy our ancestors' work. You made it better. Captain Thexenor stepped forward, his silver eyes reflecting new understanding. You are saying that we are all inheritors of the same legacy? Exactly, Sarah said. Your species found abandoned human technology and built amazing civilizations with it. Our species rediscovered our own logical foundations and reached the stars. Now we're all here together, and we can do things none of us could do alone. But not everyone in the hall was convinced. Representative Mordock of the hegemony stood, his scaled face showing deep suspicion. Pretty words, human. But your species now controls every automated system in the galaxy. You could shut down our worlds with a thought. How do we know you won't use this power to enslave us? The hall fell silent. This was the fear that had been growing since Sarah's broadcast. Humans had the power to control galactic technology like gods. What would stop them from becoming tyrants? Sarah looked around the hall at hundreds of worried faces. She thought about Admiral Morrison demanding to fight the Zephyrians, about her own anger at being called primitive, about the human desire for revenge after months of humiliation. Then she thought about the ancient ruins on Kepler 442b and the star charts that showed a galaxy full of life that the original architects had helped to flourish. Representative Mordock raises an important point, Sarah said. We do have the power to control your technology. We could shut down your ships, stop your computers, even turn off life support systems on your worlds. Fear rippled through the hall. Some delegates reached for emergency communicators, preparing to call their fleets. "But here's what we're going to do instead," Sarah continued. She nodded to Marcus, who began typing on his laptop. Throughout the galaxy, automated systems received new programming, but instead of taking control away from alien species, the new code did something unprecedented. It opened up the foundational layers of technology and made them accessible to everyone. "We're giving you the source code," Marcus announced. "All of it. Every foundation protocol, every base algorithm, every logical framework that your civilizations are built on. You'll finally understand how your own technology really works." The hall erupted in shocked voices. Delegates spoke rapidly to their translators, trying to understand what this meant. Sarah raised her hand for silence. "For the first time in galactic history, every species will have access to the real principles behind interstellar civilization. You won't have to guess how faster-than-light travel works or why your computers make certain decisions. You'll know," Admiral Morrison stepped forward, "and in return, we want to learn from you. Your species have found solutions we never imagined. Together, we can build things that surpass even what the original architects created." Captain Thexanor was the first to speak. "You are offering partnership instead of dominion?" "We're offering something better than either," Sarah said. "We're offering understanding." The architects disappeared because they were alone. They were the only species in the galaxy that understood the technology they created. When they died out, their knowledge almost died with them. She gestured to the diverse gathering around the hall. "But we're not alone. We have a whole galaxy of different minds, different ways of thinking, different solutions to the same problems. Imagine what we could discover together." Marcus was already demonstrating the possibilities. His laptop was connected to a Zephyrian harmonic processor, a Vorthan self-repair system, and a Kalaria motion translator. The combination was creating processing capabilities that none of the individual technologies could achieve alone. "In just the past hour," Marcus said excitedly, "I've found 17 ways to improve our ancestors' original designs using alien innovations. And that's just the beginning." Representative Mordock studied the data flowing across the displays. His suspicion was slowly being replaced by scientific curiosity. "These improvements, they are significant. They're just the start," Sarah said. "Every species here has spent thousands of years developing unique approaches to galactic technology. Now we can finally combine all our knowledge." Speaker Cothron called for order. "The consortium must vote on this proposal. Do we accept the humans as equal partners in galactic civilization, with full access to the technological foundations we have all inherited?" The vote was unanimous. As delegates began making plans for unprecedented technological cooperation, Sarah looked out through the station's viewports at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there were the ruins of the original architect civilization, the first humans who had reached beyond their homeworld to touch the galaxy. They had given their knowledge freely to other species, then vanished into history. But their children had returned, not as conquerors or gods, but as partners ready to build something greater than any single species could achieve alone. The galaxy had called humans primitive savages. Then they had called them returning gods. Now finally they would know them as equals, fellow inheritors of an ancient legacy that belonged to everyone who reached for the stars. Marcus was already working with alien programmers, their different minds combining to solve problems in ways that surprised everyone. Sarah smiled as she watched them work. This was what the architects had really wanted. Not worship, not dominion, but cooperation between minds that could dream of touching infinity together. The age of condescension was over. The age of true civilization had begun.